Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar. Hi, I am so excited to be here with all of you. As you can tell from the title of our presentation, A Predictable, Stress-Free Supply Chain. Today, we'll be discussing a challenge that is especially relevant for small and medium-sized businesses across the US, managing supply chains efficiently in an increasingly unpredictable market. I'm excited to show you all how SoSmart helps businesses simplify, manage, and improve their supply chain operations through better planning, visibility, and system integration. My name is Elizabeth, and I will be your presenter today. So welcome, and let's get started. Before I hop right in with the agenda, I would like to remind everyone that the recording of this webinar will be available for you on our website, YouTube channel, LinkedIn, as well as other socials. So let's get started. Today, we'll start with an introduction to the market and the context, and ultimately why we decided to host a webinar focused on supply chain. We'll talk about the key supply chain challenges currently facing SMEs, common operational pain points and inefficiencies, and then we'll talk about how SoSmart's approach to the supply chain can help you and give you a little bit of insight into that with a live demo showing how businesses can move from reactive management to proactive planning, from demand all the way to order. And lastly, we'll close out with a review of the key takeaways and benefits and some of the use cases that we discussed in the webinar today. So let's get started with an exploration of a little bit of the context that we exist in. We've analyzed data and reports from official industry sources, and one thing is very clear. There is significant room for improvement in how many SMEs manage their supply chains, particularly when it comes to digitalization, planning, and integrated systems, or the integration of software into the management of these processes. Research has shown that on average, small manufacturers are less productive than larger ones, and this is in large part because of that lack of technological adoption. In fact, 24% of service firms and 43% of manufacturers reported that supply chain disruptions were impeding business activities in October of 2024. Only 6% of companies report full end-to-end supply chain visibility according to Geodis Supply Chain Worldwide Survey. So today we're going to talk about how we can solve these problems and how SoSmart can help you integrate better technology into your process and hopefully transform your supply chain into a predictable process that is stress-free. So what are the typical issues faced by SMEs? And where are the fires starting? Many businesses rely on disconnected Excel spreadsheets, manual processes, and disconnected systems that are managing sales, purchasing, inventory, and operations, leading to a lack of integrated information. As a result of this lack of integration, teams work in silos, planning becomes difficult and excessively time-consuming. This lack of visibility across the business results in decision-making becoming reactive instead of proactive. And this reactive approach leads to two major and costly problems: overstock, too much inventory tied up and increased storage costs, and stockouts, not enough inventory to meet customer demand, resulting in missed sales and reduced customer satisfaction. Both issues directly impacting profitability, operational efficiency, and ultimately the long-term growth of your company, regardless of its size. So that is where the SoSmart approach comes in. What is the SoSmart approach? It's a direct and above all scalable methodology that can be replicated across a variety of SME environments. It's based on three simple steps, really: visibility, recommendations, and action. So what does that look like in a single seamless process? Starting with the integration of your information in one place. This starting point provides visibility, which allows companies to clearly understand what is actually needed, avoiding assumptions and unnecessary emergencies later that we all know too well. Once an overview of your operations is established, recommendations from the system transform demand into clear operational priorities with actionable steps. And hence, action, immediate action, means being able to generate purchase orders or assembly orders immediately without manual interpretation or addition of interim steps. In the context of process flow, there are some specific benefits overall. A well-structured supply chain delivers significant operational benefits because it introduces a single standardized process, creating alignment, accountability, and shared priorities across your business. In day-to-day operations, many companies work with fragmented information, inventory tracked, as I mentioned, in sheets, different sales and purchasing sources are managed across different tools and result in issues handled in email, Teams, calls with a lack of accessibility to that information. This leads to reactive management, duplicated checks, and decisions made without actual overview of what the situation is. By centralizing sales orders, inventory, purchasing, and production into the same process flow, as we see here, companies can reduce manual activities and errors while gaining a clearer understanding of what needs to be done today and what should be planned for tomorrow. Another major advantage is visibility into demand requirements. Users don't simply need to see that a material is missing, but also why it's missing, which order it's linked to, its priority level, and this makes bottlenecks in these interdependencies in your business immediately visible to yourself or other decision makers. Prioritized recommendations from the system further support this decision making by clearly identifying what should be purchased first, what must be produced immediately, and what can ultimately be postponed. And finally, the ability to move directly from data to action ensures that purchasing and production activities are driven by objectives and your business priorities, reducing the downtime, last-minute interventions, while improving customer delivery performance and overall reliability in your processes. So, in order to get a concrete example of this concept, I'm going to take a look at how SoSmart allows for these optimizations. The scenario we'll use during the demo is one frequently encountered in SMEs, a company involved in both distribution and some kind of light manufacturing activity or assembly operation. This ultimately means dealing with variable demand, inventory levels that are not always perfectly aligned, and sales orders with frequently changing timelines. It's realistic and a practical scenario, and I'm confident that many of you will recognize features in this demo that could provide solutions to your own operational challenges as we go through the demo together. Today's demo will be divided into two main sections. In part one, we will see how to move quickly from demand requirements to operational orders in a simple and guided way, from needs assessment to order in under 15 minutes. And in the second part, we'll focus more on analysis and reporting, showing a complete inventory overview designed to support control, visibility, and planning decisions. Let's get started and see how these concepts translate into daily operations. We'll follow a very practical process flow, and we're going to start from our item list, where we can see all of our items. And in this case, for this example, we'll be using our outdoor garden storage shelf. Here we can see some information about it. And most importantly, for our example, we're assuming that this item is assembled internally and we are assembling it to stock our inventory. We've decidedly have a lot for lot reordering policy. So the system will only recommend the quantity necessary to supply the demand. And we are assuming a lead time of 3 days with a lot accumulation period. So the period of time that the system will accumulate or consolidate the orders of 1 week. In this portion, we'll see the assembly BOM for this item, where we will be able to see all of the components that are required and in what quantities they're required to assemble our item. This represents the direct connection between the finished product and everything that must be purchased or made available in order to produce it. We started our first item, number 23. This is one component of our garden shelf. Here we can see that we will not be producing it internally. In fact, it's purchased from our vendor of preference, vendor number 3 in this case, with no assembly BOM. We're using a fixed reorder policy. That means that there is a standard quantity that will be reordered in every purchase order, and we're using a safety lead time here of 10 days. The additional parameters are the reorder point and reorder quantity, which define at which threshold below which the replenishment becomes necessary and how many will be reordered. We can see that our inventory for this part is 60 units, which is less than the reorder point that we just outlined, and we'll see how the system deals with this in just a moment. If we move on to item number 24, we have the same information item number. In this case, we have 0 quantity on hand, a bit more dire situation for this item. Similarly, it would be purchased from the same vendor, vendor number 3, and it is a fixed reorder quantity again. Here we have a different safety lead time of 5 days and different replenishment parameters. So the reorder point is 80 units and the reorder quantity is 60. We won't go into the other item cards. We'll start the example now with incoming sales orders from our customers. Here we have 3 different sales orders for our garden shelf from different customers. We're assuming today's date is the 27th of April. And so we have some shipment dates varying that are coming up now or a little bit later in the month of May. In our first order, we have a quantity of 2, and we can see that the expected shipment date for this quantity is April 30th, so in 3 days from today. We can see the shipment date here in this portion as well. The others, as I mentioned, a little bit later in May. So where would we typically actually review this information? That would be in our outbound logistics page where we can see our priorities, these shipments to be sent in the next 5 days. As mentioned, we have that one sales order, the one that is expected to be shipped on the 30th. However, we have a required quantity of 2 and there's no item availability, which is immediately visible in the outbound worksheet. So this is where the planning begins. We're going to now take it over to our planning worksheet. This is the planning worksheet. It's a tool that consolidates everything: sales orders, inventory, BOMs, lead times, and the replenishment parameters that we discussed to give us suggestions. Here we're going to consider the next month of production, and we won't be filtering on any specific items. We'll filter for all of the items that we have. We can see that the system has prepared a list of the necessary inventory and finished goods to fulfill the existing sales orders. The first 2 are our assembly items that we are assembling internally from the different sales orders, and then the remaining are the underlying components to be purchased in order to assemble those 6 quantities. From here, we can immediately see the sales order, so we can view the documents that are creating the demand, why the system is proposing this assembly order to us. This is the sales order 1 that we just saw. And we can also see what the demand of 4 quantities is from. That's from sales order 2 and 3. The system is consolidating those into one assembly order that will ultimately be due on the 22nd of May. Similarly, the system shows the order date and due date for the underlying components that must be purchased. Here we can see an exception line. This represents requirements that, based on the safety lead time or configuration of the items, are already considered late. This means that in order to meet the shipment date of the finished product, some components should have been purchased earlier. As we can see, based on the due date here. Here we can accept the recommended actions from the system, and we will proceed with carrying out those actions. You don't need any additional manual checks. We just recommend that it creates our assembly orders and our purchase orders. And from there, once we click OK, we can see that our orders are automatically produced and there are no longer any suggestions in our planning worksheet. So let's go take a look at those orders that were produced, starting with the purchase orders for the underlying components. We can see these two new purchase orders here from vendors 2 and 3. We open up this purchase order. We can see that the system has consolidated all of the items that are needed from the specific preferred vendor in question based on what assembly were to be produced. On the other hand, for purchase order 2, it has consolidated the other items that are also required as they were the preferred vendor for those other underlying items. Now, where we would typically view these items is from our inbound logistics worksheet. Here we can see that we have 2 purchase orders that are expected to be received in the next 5 days, purchase order 1 and 2, and of those we have the lines in reference that we expect to be received today, or pardon me, in the next 5 days. From here, we can show the document similarly to our sales orders. We can immediately see, and we can receive directly from the document here. Of course, depending on the complexity of the warehouse, we could have received from the previous page, or rather created a warehouse receipt document for our warehouse team. But again, we won't be doing that this way. We'll be receiving the goods directly from the purchase order in this case. So we have our quantity of 8 to be received today, and the rest we obviously won't receive. We're expecting them on the 11th of May, the 3rd of June, and the 4th of May. And now we have received the quantity required and suggested to us by the system in order to produce the assembly order, to execute the assembly order for our 2 garden shelves. Now we can go on to review the assembly orders that were created and that are due in the next 5 days that are our priority. So the system also created this assembly order. Here we again can see the underlying components and the quantities that will be required in order to produce those 2 shelves. This is the order itself, where we can see that we need 2 of item number 22. We have the due date again, so we expect this item to be shipped up on 4/30. So as of right now, it is our number 1 priority of production. Here we can see by line the quantity required per individual item and also for the entire order itself of the 2. Once we assume that these 2 units have been assembled, we can execute the order and post it. And we can see that now we don't have any open assembly orders to fulfill over the next 5 days. So now we can go back to our outbound logistics worksheet, where we'll see that the situation has changed, of course. We have a sales order coming due, but now instead of having no items available for it, we do have, in fact, the quantity available. Here, again, depending on the complexity of our shipping, we would create a pick, or alternatively, we can ship directly from the underlying sales document. In this case, for simplicity, again, we will ship the quantity of 2 directly from our sales order. We click ship, we won't invoice at this point, and now the system has executed those orders, and we have managed to ship them. From the sales order again, we can see all of the underlying and relevant documents. Here we can access the shipment documents, and if necessary, we could print and send them to a colleague or our customer. And look at that. Easily, we no longer have any sales to be shipped, and we have executed the outgoing orders. So this demo shows how, starting from a very realistic situation, incomplete inventory orders with different dates and critical components, it's possible to achieve a guided, consistent, and reliable operational process, reducing improvisation and emergency-driven management. I hope that all of you have been able to gather a feel of how a simplified system can facilitate your teams, who I imagine are working very hard to fulfill the demand of your customers, and gain a tangible example of the possibilities that exist with more structured data. Now we'll move into a short demo of the reporting capabilities we've built into SoSmart. We'll see some standard Power BI reports dedicated to inventory management. The goal of these reports is not simply to display data, but to quickly understand what's happening in the warehouse and support operational decisions related to purchasing, production, and prioritization in general. Okay, let's get into it. So we will start with our inventory overview. The inventory overview serves as the main entry point. Here we have a complete overview of inventory levels, inventory value, and trends over time. This is the ideal report for understanding whether inventory levels are under control or whether the company is carrying too much or too little stock. Here we can see that we can enter into the inventory at different levels or by location and at different points in time for our inventory. So this is just a helpful overview, high level. Next, we'll go into inventory by item. Here we can see the parts on the left side, and we're moving on to the individual item level. This report is useful for quickly identifying which items have high inventory levels, which are critical, and which are slower moving. Operationally, it helps identify where attention should be focused. Next, we have inventory by location exclusively. This answers the very practical question, where is the inventory physically located? So we can select by inventory and take a look at all of our possible warehousing locations. And this allows for targeted replenishment actions. Next, for item availability, this report is one of the most operationally focused reports. Here we can see the actual availability of items, taking into account inventory orders, reservations, and dates. And it gives us a very detailed overview. Next, we have a report specifically dedicated to gross requirements. Gross requirement provides visibility into the total demand requirements. It helps us understand how much future demand is impacting items by considering sales orders, production demand, and forecasts. And this becomes the foundation for more informed purchasing and production planning. Here, we'll get into the inventory by lot and then the inventory by serial number. The inventory by lot and serial number reports are essential for companies working with traceability requirements, and they allow us to identify which lots or serial numbers are available, where they're located, and in what quantities. And lastly, we'll take a look at our inventory forecasting report. This combines historical consumption data and trend analysis to estimate future demand and support strategic planning decisions. The operational benefit is the reduction of stockouts and warehouse overstock situations through a more proactive planning approach. In summary, these Power BI reports enable companies to move beyond simple data visualization towards a more informed, practical, and guided inventory management process that supports everyday operational decisions. So, what are the concrete benefits to what we've seen here together today? And what will you gain by applying this model? It's quite simple. Fewer emergencies, more control, and greater operational peace of mind. We have reduction in stockouts, greater predictability in purchasing, constant alignment across departments, and improved lead time accuracy, and guided decisions that make next steps clear and actionable for your team. Overall, we'll see a significant reduction in the time it takes your team to get tasks done, leaving more time for value-creating activities in your business. We've applied this approach across many SMEs, and the results are complete. The stable weekly planning, drastic reduction in urgent requests, and orders that follow much more predictable logic are a change that you feel in everyday operations. We move from the typical scenario of reactive orders to reorders suggested in advance. Instead of having invisible critical items, we have a system that makes critical items immediately visible to us. Instead of having unclear priorities, we have priorities that are sorted for us by a system. And we replace fragmented data with a single integrated source of truth and a single integrated process. We're moving away from the classic manual checks, and we're, we're going towards the requirements being immediately visible to us from our order in just a couple of steps. And ultimately, we are removing the reliance on individuals as a single point of failure in our organizations, and we're creating guided and repeatable decisions that lead to sustainable practices. So, how can you lead the supply chain and instead of chasing it? If you want to start bringing order to your supply chain, we can guide you every step of the way. We always start with a free, no obligation process analysis and can work with you to build a customized demo if needed, guiding you through the entire process from project planning to go live. And we're very excited to offer our resources and our experience to help you optimize your own business processes. Thank you guys so much for joining us on this demo and this webinar, and I'm very excited to hear from you. If you would like, please reach out to our So Smart sales team so you can get connected to a consultant and get a consultation of how So Smart can serve you today. Thank you all so much. I appreciate you being here and participating with me and look forward to your questions.